welcome back to another episode of Digitalk Arkitechs. Today we have Nigel Brooke from Leadership in Life Coaching. Welcome, Nigel, to the show. Please go ahead and tell us about yourself.
Well, thank you, Catalina, for having me on the show today. Really appreciate this. So if we talk about my career, I started my career a few years ago back in the UK. And my background's always been in logistics, distribution, operations, kind of manufacturing. And I started at a very, very small clothing company, just looking after warehousing and distribution. And then quickly started to grow up the ranks to go to the bigger companies. When I was at a company in the UK, and it was a big brewing company, I was given the opportunity to attend the Dale Carnegie Influential Management course, which it wasn't planned. It was just something I was asked to do. And I've always been inquisitive about learning, so I took this opportunity. And when I was on that course, the 4-day course, I can actually say, changed a lot of my mindset and how I thought. Then I come back and I read a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And from that part, I started learning a lot about leadership and started going through my career and applying this in a lot of what I did. I stayed at that company for another 5 years, kind of working up the ladder. And then emigrated over to Canada, me and my wife, 15 years ago. And then started with a big 3PL company, looking after their facilities, their distribution centres. From there, moved around the 3PL world, so other big logistic companies, and dealt with a lot of different kinds of 3PL. So I did fast-moving consumer goods, food grade, pharmaceutical, telecommunication. And again, doing all these good fundamentals of leadership and implementing as we went. About just over 5 years ago, me and my wife started on a bit of a real estate journey. So we started buying properties to convert, so value add, single families to triplexes. We did a church conversion. We did an array of things, some Airbnb, some flips, a little bit of industrial, and we're currently doing land development. But all this is kind of being a vehicle for what our true passion is, which is leadership. So we want to get ourselves into a position where we could be 110% dedicated to leadership, helping people with leadership in all aspects and all avenues. And that kind of gets us to the start of leadership in life. It had always been a passion 27 years ago. It was just an idea, but we've always been pushing towards that. And now we're fortunate enough to be in a position where both me and my wife are out of the corporate world, and we can really focus on this 100%.
Very good. You've been in this operational environment for over 2 decades.
Correct.
What moment did you realize that leadership was not just part of the job, but what you really wanted to work on and dedicate your life? What triggered it?
I actually think it was the course that I went on like 27 years ago. I'd always looked at leadership like to be a leader, and I wasn't in that position then. So I always thought, well, I'm not a leader. Why is leadership really applicable to me? And it was only when I went and started really researching Dale Carnegie and reading that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, that it really changed my mindset on leadership and what a broad scope it is and how effective it can be in different areas. So that was the turning point. And then the more and more that I practiced it, the more and more I really really started to believe how powerful it could be. Even into real estate, applying them same skills in real estate has proved so effective.
Very good. So on leadership, a lot of business owners think leadership is something they deal with once the company gets bigger, right?
Uh-huh.
From your experience, where do small and mid-sized businesses usually get leadership run early on?
I think the small to mid-size, because they don't have, let's say, as many leaders, there is this kind of mindset that why do we need leadership skills? We've not got that many leaders. We've got 1 or 2 leaders. Why would we invest in leadership skills? But the true definition of leadership is influence by definition. And some of the best leaders I've worked with have had no title. So not positional leadership where you have a title and people generally kind of work with you, but more just the ability to do influential leadership. So companies, small and mid-sized companies, tend to get that mindset when realistically, if they were investing in the people at all levels, there's some amazing leaders there that can have an amazing impact on any work environment or any life environment. So it's it's overlooked a little bit because they've not got this so-called structure of leaders.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense, right?
Mm.
One thing I found interesting about you is that you focus on self-leadership first,
Mm-hmm.
not just managing others. Why do you believe a business can't really scale well if the founder or manager hasn't learned to lead themselves first?
At Leadership in Life, one of our biggest pillars is self-awareness. And what we really do focus on is the ability to lead yourself so you can lead others. And with self-awareness, if you don't know your strengths, your weaknesses, how you come across to people from a communication standpoint, from an empathy standpoint, then it's very, very difficult, virtually impossible, to then train people how to be effective leaders. So one thing that we do teach, and certainly what I've had in my career from the people that have taught me, is learn to know yourself first. So how can you really work on something that you don't really know is a weakness? And if you don't get that right first and build yourself as a self-leader and a capable leader with all your strengths and your weaknesses and your learnings, then it's very, very difficult to try and motivate and pass that knowledge on to other people. Where we look at self-awareness is it's a huge one at Leadership in Life, and it's something that people think they know themselves until they really dig deep, and then they do realise that, yeah, maybe I do that wrong, or I do that different, or I could work on that. And once you start recognising it, then you can start challenging it and start, dealing with it.
That's interesting because most of the times people don't look at themselves first, right? They kind of like is however they are perceived, in my opinion, right?
Correct.
And until you look at yourself, you're clouding your own perception of yourself, kind of.
Correct, yeah. And one of the simple tools that we have in Leadership in Life is where we just ask people to, there's like an array of questions that we ask, and we ask as members, like, go ask a close friend or someone that you trust to be honest one of these questions. And one of them's like, how effective am I as a communicator? When we're chatting, do I make you feel engaged? And 90% of them come back, and the answer that they get from people is usually, I really didn't realise that whenever someone's talking to me, I'm always looking at my phone. Or when someone's trying to tell me something in confidence, I'm looking around the room. Because it's just something we do. It's habits we pick up that are embedded with us over time. And it's only when we really take that self-check and think, okay, what am I doing that I don't know I'm doing? I'm not doing anything intentional. You don't know what you don't know, but I'm just doing it. But the person who's receiving it, how are they taking it on board? So that's why we feel it's such an important tool, because you can be trying to teach something that can be totally wrong, and you don't even know that because you don't know what you don't know.
But it's true. The podcast and our audience is mostly business owners. And then, if they're listening, how can they tell whether they've created a culture where people feel safe to speak up, challenge ideas, admit mistakes, versus a culture where people are quiet and holding back?
Yeah, and this is a huge topic, is this, Carolina? This is the psychological safety part. People have been talking about this for years and years and years, but it only now seems to be getting traction that people are realising that there's a process to fixing this. But when we have a psychologically safe environment, what we're doing, and this is exactly the question you've asked there, is we're encouraging people to share ideas, to not be afraid to make a mistake or to say something that in an unpsychological safe environment they'd feel like, I'm going to sound a bit silly if I ask this question. Psychological safety it's so important, because people, when they feel psychologically safe, they'll challenge all levels, because most of the people that leaders are talking to, they're passing on information, but it's usually the people that they work with or report to them are the experts. So as an expert, if you're confident enough to be able to share ideas, concerns, potential failings, it's gold, and that is amazing information that as a leader you want to be obtaining. You want any of your staff to be able to come up to you and say, I don't understand this, could you tell me a little bit more? And not feel bad that they didn't understand it first time round. Because if you don't do that, all you're going to do is create an environment where, people just don't say nothing. And then so much amazing ideas, amazing thoughts never even come to fruition. We never even see them because people are
Mm.
scared to share them. And there's so many, you can just Google it. There's so many events over history where psychological safety was not in place and has caused huge, huge, huge repercussions, like companies being fined millions of dollars for not creating an environment where the experts were allowed to share the
You have a
concept.
good you have a good story on that one. I
Yeah,
remember we talked about it.
yeah. If anyone can remember the Volkswagen emissions, let's say, scandal that happened, and it was down to the fact that I think it was the Volkswagen Jetta. It was meant to be
It was.
the car of the future. The US market was screaming for it 'cause it had the emissions where they needed to be, and it was a very reliable car, very cost-effective car, etc. So it was set for amazing things. But when they were doing the tests on the emissions in the factories and in the labs, the emissions were under the tolerance record or the level. To go onto the public highway, them emissions would increase to the point where it was no longer within the range that it needed to be. Now, however, the staff, the techs, the experts, they were unable or they didn't feel comfortable enough to be able to share this concern with the CEO and the C-suite team.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's purely because of the environment they created. So what happened? What it kept under the radar. People are fearful of losing their jobs if they mentioned anything. It got launched and then it got audited, and it was found that it was way above the emissions level, which people knew but were just too scared to highlight. And lo and behold, then obviously the whole investigation opened up, and Volkswagen was fined billions of dollars for that. So that's just one, but there's so many other environments. There's a story like Nokia. Apple were coming on board, Android were coming on board. The Nokia CEO at the time didn't want to hear from, or didn't create the environment where his techs or his coders could bring stuff to him to say, we need to change his business model because things, the dynamics in the market's changing. So they kept doing what they were doing, and then the Apples of the world, the Samsungs of the world, these all started to creep up and take over. So it is so important that as a business owner you create this environment, because you're gonna miss so much amazing information. You're gonna miss so much amazing learnings from your staff because they're scared to express it.
I actually think good leadership creates safe environments. Poor leadership creates toxic environments and environments that make it very difficult to work in. The good environments usually in return get really good retention rates with people, happy people. They tend to stay much longer in one position or in one company. Well, when you have those toxic, poor leadership companies, those companies have terrible turnover and also very unhappy people. And, I think in my time in the corporate world, as an entrepreneur now and with my own company and being technically the leader, I've learned that that is the difference between the definition of a leader and a boss, right? And bosses are there to demand and impart orders, and leaders are there to help and help the teams and the people around them rise up instead of putting them down, if that makes any sense.
It makes total sense. And if we look at the word like boss usually comes around, well, how successful is a company going to be under your watch? So what's the bottom line going to look like? Are we going to increase business? Are we going to increase everything that's going to grow it from a share standpoint or a market share value? A leader, or certainly an influential leader, is all about the people. And the funny thing about it is if you write with the people, you look after the people, you become a visionary for the people, all the other parts about companies running successfully is going to happen anyway. They go hand in hand. A well-led facility, a well-led office, a well-led plant, a well-led anything, 9 times out of 10 is going to be very successful. So
yeah, it's
get
true.
the leadership part right, everything else just falls into place.
Yeah, it comes with a lot of responsibility.
A lot of responsibility, because it's not about you, it's about the people that are around you now. So you're not just thinking, what's for me? You're thinking, how can I be the best I can be for the people that I'm working with? How can I empower them? How can I give them the tools they're going to need to be successful? It's not just a me thing, and it's an ongoing thing. I always say no one's born a leader, and no one ever stops learning how to be a leader. It's an ongoing thing. We're always learning. We're always getting a little bit more knowledge and bettering his education on it.
Yeah, and I mean, we all know we learn from our mistakes, but oh boy, does that ever apply when you're a leader or in a position of power?
Yeah,
Because usually the mistakes are more costly.
they are. And just on that, that's a great point, because with the mistakes, I think everyone has this super, super big fear of mistakes. And mistakes are, I won't encourage anyone to go out and deliberately try and make mistakes, but when people look at mistakes as a failing, I think that's such a negative thing. Mistakes are an opportunity. No one ever
Learning
learns.
opportunities.
Every mistake that's made is an opportunity. It's a lesson. It's something that's going to add to your arsenal to make you even better next time. So we always try to say to people, yeah, you're going to make mistakes. Everybody makes them, some more than others. But if you look at them like, right, let me analyze what happened and learn from it, I'm so much more prepared now as I take this next step.
It also, when you make mistakes, also builds on your character, right? Your ability to endure difficult times,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Well, when you're successful and if you're not making mistakes, actually, not even successful, but if you're not making mistakes, you're not really growing as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a safe, always cushion environment, then you never really learn to fall and get up and keep on going, right?
Yep. And they always say there's no growth in comfort. And it's so
So
true. If everything's
so
comfortable,
true.
if everything's running perfect, you're never going to learn how to, or you're never going to know how to deal with issues when they arise.
I'll tell you a story because it applies to this quite a bit. So a few years back, we were moving houses, and um, unfortunately, things didn't go quite as planned and as smoothly as we were hoping for, and so the real estate, it's freaking out, and the the seller for the house we were buying was overreacting hugely, right? So here I am. So the deal was kind of like we were selling two properties, we were buying one. But the purchaser for one of the properties we were selling did not plan accordingly, and therefore you know how it goes. It's a dominoes effect, right? One falls, everything behind it goes
Yeah.
with it, right? So this guy didn't have a plan. Last week before closing, or last 2 weeks before closing, he doesn't have the right financing for it. And so the real estate calls me freaking out, right? And I go, well, let me figure it out, right? I'll come up with a solution. And then, the seller for the house we were buying, that guy was flipping, right? And so, he calls him to tell him what's going on. The guy is flipping. He calls me back and says, like, you're the one with the biggest problem, and the one that's like the most calm of everybody.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I've been through enough to not overreact. And I think if there's one thing I've learned from experience in my life, it's there's no point in overreacting as a leader, as a person. When you freaked out, there is no solutions, right? So this the best course of action then is, what are my solutions, what are like my B C plan, right? And then start acting, and that I think also defines kind of leadership, right? Those that are devastated by adversity tend to overreact and let the negativity of the situation take over.
Yep.
Well, really great leaders don't let the adversity take over. Instead, they flip right away that switch that goes, okay, what are my options? Where do I find the right solutions? And then boom, you're right. Sometimes the adversity turns as like, hey, this was even, an even better solution than what we were going for. And so I think it's also, great leaders have a really good way of reacting and facing adversity
Yep.
in general. Okay, so
Yeah.
That being said, let's talk a little bit about you have an interesting theory on your business model, because the services you provide with leadership, you've basically said, leadership is not a one-off thing. It's a continuous improvement, and I 100% agree with that. One-offs don't stick. Leadership has to be reinforced constantly. So here's the question: why do so many companies invest in training but still struggle to create lasting behavior changes?
So this is my theory with my analysis, but unfortunately, I believe that a lot of companies look at leadership training as more of a box checking exercise. So we
Okay.
have, give you an example, we have 5 new leaders, right? We better get some leadership training. It's not a case of we want to change this culture, we want to empower people, we want to make people the best they can possibly be. It's we now have leaders, we should get some leadership training. So two sides to that. I don't believe that we should be doing leadership training to people just because they've come leaders. I think leadership training should be for everybody. I think it should
I agree.
be from when you start. Well, the reason we call the company Leadership in Life is because we believe it's not a 24/7 thing, not a 9 to 5 thing, it's a 24/7 thing. The other part about it is most leadership workshop training, along with other kind of training, is usually a 2, 3, 4, 5 day course where they'll pull X amount of people into a classroom and teach some great knowledge of leadership, some great foundational knowledge. The challenge is that there's no human being can then digest that much information and then go out there and be effective. It's proven. If you're in a classroom for 4 or 5 days getting a bombardment of knowledge, after 4 weeks, they say the average retention is about 20% of what you've learned. So the intent's correct, and kudos to anybody that's having people learn leadership. But in order for it to be truly effective, it has to be a continuing thing. You have to drip feed leadership knowledge into people. So what we do is we do have a business where we have information in our portal, leadership information. We have tools, we have tips, we have a community there where people can chat, share ideas, share concerns, and we're very active in it. But what we also do is we have guest speakers that come on, and these are people, CEOs, CFOs, entrepreneurs, business owners, all kinds of different people that come on, and we do like 2 to 3 of these a month. And me and my wife actually interview them, and we ask them the vulnerable questions. We ask them when they started their journey, did they suffer from imposter syndrome, public speaking? What were their fears and what were their strengths? And the
I
reason
think we
that
all have.
everybody has. There's not one person that we've spoke to or we've even chatted on since we started the company that's not, especially the imposter syndrome. It's such a big thing that people just feel they're not good enough. But these guest speakers are we're very fortunate. They're very vulnerable and they share everything. And for us, that's invaluable because our members then look at that as some of them are starting their journeys and think, okay, so we've got a CFO or CEO of a big company here who's obviously been very successful in his career, but he too was at the point where he was scared to take that job because he couldn't do it. He was scared to stand in front of a crowd. He was scared that he wouldn't be able to do it, or he failed numerous amounts of times before he got it right, and that's what changed the direction of his career. So our business model is a continuous business model. It's always there. Our members jump into our portal, they ask us questions, they either jump on the live calls with the guest speakers or they're recorded, they can go back and review them. We pull out all the findings, we post the findings. So our business model is slightly different. We don't want just to be, we're going to teach you a lot of information and then hopefully you retain it and it helps you in your day to day. We're like, no, we want to be there. We want you to be able to jump into our portal. We want you to be continuously learning and just in a controlled manner, getting this good leadership information, drip fed to you so you can be, effective with it.
Yeah. And I think that's, at the end of the day, that's the right way of doing it, I think. I remember when I was in the corporate world, it was always the one-off like workshop, right? And it wasn't available to everybody, just a selected few. And you were kind of in and out and never to come back or talk about it or anything like that, right? I think, I mean, my personal experience where that change was reading. So I have also read the Win Friends and Influence People, but I think it's so many other books, right, that have influenced how I now manage my own company
Mm-hmm.
and my people. And I can't say it was a one thing, but it was a combination of, learning of, from life experience. You know what? If I have anything to say about this, is the life experiences, learning what not to do from the bad leaders and bosses I had when I was going through the corporate and, the other jobs. Trying to learn what not to do
Mm-hmm.
was far more important than learning to just, learning leadership in general.
Yeah.
But just learning from, when a person was in a management position was a boss, not a leader, right? I think that to me was like, I did not want to be that person
Yeah.
at the end of the day. Now, in a position of leadership, sometimes it's unavoidable to be the back cop because
Mm-hmm.
you just
Yeah.
have to be. But learning how to manage those experiences, not just for yourself, but for other people, is very important, right? Because we at the end of the day, we are running companies, we are leading people. So that comes with challenges, huge challenges, right? But even in the bad times, knowing how to let go a person without being cruel. I'm just gonna leave it at that. It's also important, right? But knowing how to lead, and I think the best way to say it is learning how to lead with compassion, because
Yes.
there's so many, especially in the corporate world, there's so little of it, right? Everybody becomes a number. It's all transactional, right? Without looking at all the other factors. And when I started my company, I did not want my people to feel that way. And to, I have really, really special situations within mine, but, understanding each situation was important, right? Like knowing the person, not just the number or the name. I think it's a big part of leadership that a lot of people in positions of power miss.
Yeah. And you've touched on so many amazing points there, Carolina. If I can just go back on a couple there. The one where you spoke about having the wrong lead and how you learn from it, I think that's so critical. And that's why psychological safety is such a big topic at the minute, and so it should be. Because I think people need to realise, what does a good leader look like? So many people just work for someone that's abrupt, demoralising, has a different mindset, and people can feel, well, he's a leader, he's the SVP of my department, he's the leader, he's got to be doing it right, and what he says has got to be the right way of leading. So to your point, it's so important that people know, yeah, we're all going to work for that person who is not a good leader. But if you know what a good leader looks like, you can recognize that straight away and not fall into the mindset of looking at that as the standard. Another thing you touched on there is name, and I've put a lot of posts out there on LinkedIn, is that if you can learn somebody's name, the power of learning somebody's name is it's like a superpower. And
It is.
early in my career, that was one thing. I always wanted to learn people's names and just a little bit about them. So as soon as in my case, distribution center, if I were put in charge of a distribution center, I spent so much time trying, and I'm not the greatest at remembering names, I'll be honest, but I
Oh,
spent
neither am I.
so much time trying to remember everybody's name and taking the time to just stop and learn a little something about them. It makes such a difference when you're greeting somebody and you can call them by the name and ask them how the weekend was, and you know a little bit. Were your boys? How did the soccer go? Were your boys this weekend? And did you enjoy your vacation? As opposed to just a general morning. So there's actually a survey that was done a lot of years ago, and people said that they would rather be disciplined than ignored, because at least when they're being disciplined, they're being recognised. And that it's quite worrying that people feel in this day and age that they're still working at companies and they're still working under so-called leaders, and they feel like they're ignored and they're just coming through the door every day and there's no value there. So it's the name part. I 100% think is such an amazing thing.
The name, but when you say discipline, you know what? They do prefer discipline, but not all discipline comes with the same impact or the same acknowledgement, let's call it, right? Because when discipline comes as criticism, it's poorly received.
Yep.
Right? So discipline has to come with constructive criticism where, the person understands the mistake but acknowledges, at the same time, you're not just telling them you made a mistake, you're helping them work through it and how to fix it from your point in your position of power. When it comes just as finger pointing is where it becomes a negative.
Yeah. And as far as the discipline part, being a leader is not about being liked by everybody. That's not the definition
100%.
of a lot of people think in order to be a good leader, everybody has to like me. I cannot say anything negative, let's say, for someone's actions, for someone's mind, the way that they behave. And that's not what a leader is. Leaders do have to do disciplinary procedures. They do have to do these kind of things. But to your point, when they're doing them, it's how they execute them. Are they executing them based on stat-based? So if you're having to discipline someone, is it based on no emotional data, just factual, hard data, and you're having an open conversation about that? And then what comes from it from there? So a lot of people think, I've done disciplinary, right? I've done it, everybody go back to it. But really, you should then, the idea is whoever you have to do a disciplinary with is going to be feeling very negative. So how do you build that person back up then? That's the key to a good leader, is you're going to have uncomfortable conversations, 100%.
100%.
But then how do you get that person back into that frame of mind where the learning's there, and again, they want to pick themselves up and they want to go on and be better than they were the previous day, as opposed to leaving them in this negative mindset. You need to really, really get back down, communicate with them, chat with them, and make them feel like this has happened, but we are going to learn from this, and we're going to have a better relationship from it.
Yeah, I agree. All right. So let's change this a little bit because I want to touch on this one. So, Digital Arkitechs is a marketing company. So we focus a lot on external branding, messaging, customer experience. How does internal leadership, affects and impacts, actually, let me rephrase that. Poor or negative leadership inside a company eventually impacts the customer experience and the brands themselves?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you've got an environment where there is poor leadership, there's a very, very heavy chance that the people in that who are working in that environment are very going to be negative. They're going to be very disengaged. They're not going to be motivated. They're not going to have generally the passion and desire to do a good job. So if you've got customers see this. I'm from a 3PL background, so we've dealt with a lot of customers in my time. And when you're in an environment where you do feel engaged, you do have a leader that's a visionary and is driving you in a direction, you do feel empowered. When you're talking to customers, when you're dealing with customers, it becomes contagious. I've walked customers around facilities, potential new customers, and the feedback that I've got is, even if we've not got the processes in place or the systems in place to be able to get the business, they've said the environment here is the environment where I feel super confident that the people here are so engaged, they're going to give 110% to me as a customer. So creating that environment has an amazing effect on a customer. How your people perform under you or alongside you as a leader is a true reflection of what you're going to give to that customer. A negative environment will always get a customer curious and always get them nervous, because you're walking into some of people that look pretty disengaged. You've got a bunch of people that are so engaged in what they're doing and so passionate about what they're doing. That gives a customer a lot of confidence that they're going to execute on what you're asking them to.
I think that's the Costco experience versus the Walmart experience.
Yes, maybe so. It is maybe so. And I think to that point, it has to be genuine. You can't just have this fluff of everything's amazing, when deep down you know that it's not. You have to create that environment where you don't have to constantly be driving it. People just adopt it. Yeah, but it is very, very valuable to customers. It's a great,
Yeah.
great advantage.
You know what? You feel that a lot on retail, right? When you walk into stores, you know which ones are like it's hard to explain, I guess, but you know when the people are enjoying their job and when they're not. And they said, "Oh, you can't." I'm like, "Yes, you can. You absolutely can. You can see them."
If I go to a checkout and the person at checkout is smiling and happy, I want that guy to serve me. The person, it's human nature. We gravitate to it. I'll give you an example. Even like when we're doing real estate and we're working with contractors, one of the first things we looked at with a contractor is how do you communicate? What's your communication like? Is everything a burden if I'm asking you to do something? If I ask you if you could help with this, is it one of those where I really don't want to phone the contractor because they're so negative, they're so down, everything seems like a big chore. Whereas when you get a contractor or someone you're working with that's so upbeat and have that, we can do it, anything's possible. Give me a bit of time, we can work it out. Don't worry about it, we've got this. It's night and day of that relationship that you want. You just gravitate, or most people just gravitate to that.
Yeah. You know, my team and my company, I always say um, to the customer, right? It doesn't matter if they're talking to me or and I you know if one of whoever XYZ did the job, right? At the end of the day, they don't care the name behind it, the outcome. So it's not me. I mean, I'm the face of the company, but and they'll come and if they're unsatisfied or unhappy, they'll come and scream at me.
Mm-hmm.
but but it's also is the reflection of everybody in the team, right? And if the environment is good and positive, and how we acknowledge mistakes and take ownership of them, and then how we fix them, I think that's what at the end of the day people care most about, right? And to that point, I'm like, this is where leadership really really comes to, and shows in different stages of your life. So I had this, I'm not going to name the brands, but I'm going to say, my experience. So I had this car, and it wasn't a fancy brand. I'm just going to make the comparison. It wasn't a fancy brand, but the customer service and the manager and the customer was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So I showed up, the car had a problem, an electrical problem. So anytime there was some sort of rain, or my radio came on, it used to come on even if the car was off. It was freaky. So one day we're like in the house and we started hearing this music playing really loud. We couldn't tell where it was coming from. And then we opened the garage door and the car, it's playing music. The car is off, nobody in the car. So anyways, I take it in. This guy just this goes on for quite a few visits. We can't pinpoint the problem. So anytime it snows and the electrical thing gets wet, the car just starts playing music. The whole panel turns on and the music starts playing. So I keep going back in and the guy just jumps in the car. We go for a drive. He tries to figure it. He turns around. I'm like, it's still happening. So I keep coming. The guy is fantastic, right? Again, I'm repeating, not a fancy brand, just a normal brand. Like we're talking, one of the Korean brands, right? Anyways, excellent experience, customer experience, right? The guy was on top of it. Anytime I showed up, he was there to help me. At the end of the day, it took several visits. It was hard to figure out, but we figured it out. It got fixed. I was satisfied, right? Did we have a problem? Yes, because things are not perfect, right? But were they willing and ready to fix it with me? Yes. He showed his leadership in, in every possible way. He never freaked out. He was never upset. He's just like, if it's still happening, we'll take the car again and try and figure it out. Okay, perfect. Now, I go the opposite way. So, now we're in the fancy side of things where things are supposed to go. You're supposed to get the absolute best experience in every possible way. That was not the case. So we walked into this dealership. We had just purchased the car, we had an issue, and this person treated us like, and you know what? It can be the fanciest brand, and if the leadership and the service and isn't there, it makes a huge difference in the impact. It's incredible.
Yeah. Do you know something? When you were telling that story, Caroline, I thought you were going to say the story that I tell so many people about, and it's virtually the same. But we bought a car a couple of years ago, and it was due its service, and I took it to one dealership for its service, and the whole experience was very flat. It was, thank you for your keys. It'll be a couple of hours. We'll give you a call. Okay. Somebody says to me, take it to this other dealer, same car company, different dealer. I had to drive an extra close to 20 kilometers to this other dealer, and it was amazing. And when I went in, the difference was they took my keys. The salesperson had the time for me. I went and grabbed he said, go grab a coffee. He come and sat with me for 5 minutes and had a coffee. How you liking the car, Nigel? Is it what you expected? Does it drive nice? Blah. I said to people afterwards, the two dealerships there, same dealerships, same company, same service, same cost, no difference. I would never go back to the first dealership. I'll drive an extra 20 kilometers to go to the other dealership before I'd ever go back there, just because their sales team have had the leadership training where you need to look after the customer. You need to make them feel welcome. Any questions they've got, you got to try your best to make them feel like their purchase was a good purchase and that we're there to make sure it's an enjoyable experience. And it is just night and day.
It was, yeah. So that was my. Now I'm gonna say the fancy experience is started like atrocious. It was so bad. Like, it was so bad. My husband got into a huge argument with the guy. Huge. Right? And so the reaction was to just go talk to the dealership, like the manager, right? And so that kind of took another level, right? So now the difference is the premium service, right? But now we have to go straight there to get the service, the right kind of service, right? The proper service, which is, it's okay, but it's sad that, that didn't translate to the rest of it, right?
Yeah. And it's just a bad taste in your mouth, isn't it? You can't.
It's never the same. It's never the same.
And the thing is, what people don't realize is the damage is not just that customer. It's like, you ever speak to that to a friend or family member, you're going to give such a bad review, and you're going to deter people from going there based on your experience. So, yeah, it can be really, really damaging.
Oh, I can tell you, to this day, I say, if you're going to buy this kind of car, do not go there. Now, I'm still a customer because for other reasons, I kind of have to keep going there.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody else, I go somewhere else.
Yeah,
don't go there, right?
So
and I agree with you. I was willing to go further away. The only reason why we couldn't was because we had already placed a hold on the car, and it was already basically chip and there.
Yeah.
So it was like backtracking was just not gonna work, and we had waited for this car for like 6 months. But anyway, so it's, and I think going back to the leadership and branding and marketing and all that stuff, the main point here is leadership in any company, luxury brands or economy brands. Sometimes it is more about the experience and how brands handle issues than it is, the luxury experience. If it's luxury but it's a poor experience, you much rather have the economy with the good experience.
Yes.
Right? And I've lived through it, and I know it's true, right? So leadership, no matter where you are, it's such an important part of any company, any brand, no matter where you are. And it's the same thing, right? Whether you're serving the rich or whether you're serving the it has to be the experience has to be there for them to come back and want to be part of it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Let me close this up with one more question, just because I love asking this question to anybody that's listening, and they know I love technology, and AI is such a big part of our world these days. I want you to tell us a little bit from your point of view on leadership. AI, the impact of AI in leadership, it's huge. I know that. But is it helping or is it exposing weaker leaders faster? What's the impact of AI in leadership, in your opinion?
I think AI is going to force us to a position where or let's say, the more effective leaders are going to be the ones that stand out. And I think the reason I say that is because what we know about AI, and it's growing so fast, we talk about automation, and AI, automation has been around forever. It was obviously built in the big plants, the big car manufacturers was the kind of original automation. Then Amazon jumped on, and it's in distribution centers, and it's an amazing tool. And everyone says it's going to do everybody out of work. And yes, it has reduced the labour market, but it's not done people out of work. Whereas AI is moving at such a rate that it's not in big plants, it's not in warehouses, it's in offices, it's in laptops, it's everything that we're doing, it's everywhere. Now, what I believe AI is going to do, it's going to certainly start taking over, which it is already, a lot of the analytical, repetitive kind of jobs where we can just ask a command and get a ton of information that would normally have taken X amount of people, X amount of hours. However, let's say the soft skills, AI is not going to be able to get into. So it's funny, I was watching like a webinar not so long ago, and it was on about trades. And they were saying that the trade industry, plasterer, plumber, electrician, whatever it may be, are in such demand, and are going to be even more demand, because this is something that AI cannot affect. AI is not going to drywall your house. It's not going to change a receptacle. It's going to do a lot of things. I think it's an amazing tool. But I think the more people that can get on board with being able to lead and being an effective leader, an effective communicator, who can work with empathy, have great ethics, be very self-aware of the strengths and weaknesses, I think they're the people that are going to stand out. And I think, unfortunately, I think a lot of the other people who don't have these skills are going to be the people that are more susceptible to AI starting to encroach into their corporate work environment. So, again, to summarise it, I think the soft skills, the leadership skills, the human skills, the interpersonal skills, how we communicate are going to be in such high demand, and there's going to be a lot of people fighting to be the best that they can be at them. So from a leadership standpoint, I think AI is certainly going to affect a lot of the areas of how we communicate in certain areas. From a system standpoint, the actual human-to-human part of it, I think leadership is just going to get stronger and stronger. And I think the people that master this and become the best at this are the ones that are going to stand out.
Very good. Well, Nigel, thank you so much for spending this last almost an hour with us. It was very nice talking to you. We hope to see you back soon. For everyone else, thank you so much for sharing with us. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you.